In our research, we were looking at the relationship between price and the perceived quality of the product given the price, right? In general, we do know there is a relationship between price and the decision to buy. So independently of that, we also have a relationship now established between price and quality, which inherently also influences the decision for the customer to buy.
Hey there, my name is Eric and you're listening to Delve, the official thought leadership podcast of the Desautels Faculty of Management at McGill University. So today I'm interviewing Professor Rim Hariss, an expert in operations management here at McGill, about pricing strategies. So now this interview was super interesting to me because it kind of broke my preconceptions about how organizations price their products. So normally we might expect supply and demand, manufacturing costs, and other operational factors to dictate price. And yeah, those are important factors, but some of Harris's recent work introduces another surprising element that retailers should really start thinking about: storytelling. Now, in this interview, I learned that consumers see less expensive products as being of lesser quality, and that more expensive products are of more quality. I also learned that discounts and sales can train consumers to avoid purchasing a product at full price, and offering zero sales could leave retailers vulnerable to the competition. So all this means that firms should really think about what their price says about them. What story are they telling about their product and about their brand through the prices that they set? And the right pricing strategy can actually help them win over customers and form a lasting relationship with them. So we're going to dive into all of that and more. So here's my conversation with Professor Rim Hariss. Let's delve into it. All right. So Professor Rim Hariss, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Eric, for the invitation. Very, very much happy to be part of this brilliant podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm very excited to get into some of your work because just on a personal level, I find it very fascinating. So my background is in communications, and I don't know, a big theme in that field is just how kind of everything you do says something about you or your brand or your company. And it seems like that kind of holds true in some of your work and some of your recent findings, specifically as it relates to price and what price says about your company and your product and your brand. So I don't know, just to kick us off, maybe I can just start with a bit of a broad question, but I don't know, what do prices say about a company or a product?
I would say, prices have been used and are still used a lot to signal where the company stands in terms or in comparison with the competitors, right? And so typically that's just not like the range of the prices are important, but also the type of strategy of pricing that is used by the company can also be part of its DNA. So actually, that's something I was going to end the podcast with, which is about pricing being as a strategic decision rather than a tactical decision, which are basically, there should be both. Tactical decisions means their prices should be changed every day, every couple of days. There is a more quantitative approach to how we can change these prices, maybe more personalized. And we'll talk about that more and more. And strategy or strategic decision more about what is the philosophy of prices that we want to have. Do we want to have subscriptions? Do we want to have constant fixed prices, everyday low prices, and just commit to the cheapest type of price that we can get compared to the competitor? Do we want to signal high quality with high price? So I would say, it's important to take the dimension of price in a company and how they want to position themselves in the industry they are in compared to the competitors. Otherwise, we'll talk about markdown pricing. There's also promotions, which are used to drive momentarily and boost demand and traffic in the store. And obviously, price is related to profit and revenue. So all of these pricing strategies have to have some sort of economic value. But we'll talk a lot as well about how do prices can affect even customer behavior, customer perception of the product, customer perception of the brand, and thus touching the long-term effect of pricing strategies.
Thank you. Yeah. So, and I realized that was a very broad overview of kind of just all of the different elements that kind of factor in here. And the reason why I wanted to start with that is just because I think I don't know. Prices are such an obvious way of like communicating the value of a product, and it's not just an economic tool in this case. It's not just a tool for generating revenue or for meeting a demand. It's telling the customer something about who you are, and I don't know. I find this really fascinating because I'm wondering just how this compares to how companies typically make decisions about pricing. So you alluded to this idea of just supply and demand. Like, is that the only element that traditionally people factor in when they're choosing their prices for their products, or are there other variables involved in those decisions?
That's a great question. I think initially we think of the classical reasons as just managing the supply and demand, right? And a lot of the pricing strategies are linked to that. So, for example, markdown strategy, markdown pricing is linked to how to clear inventory so that you can start a new season, right? If we're talking about apparel, seasonal goods, you have to get rid of those winter skis so that you can start the spring or the summer collection, right? We're talking about groceries. We have perishable product as well, right? So you need to do promotions or markdowns to get rid of again of that inventory. So that's linked to, I guess, managing your inventory, which is having excess supply compared to the demand that is now declining. From the other side, markups or increasing price or anchoring price at a higher range and then decreasing it, what we call price skimming. Those can have more manipulative effect, I would say, on how consumers view a product. For example, introducing a product for the first time to a market, you have a bit more, leeway to kind of, put some sort of perception of what that product is and what the quality is. And typically you have more freedom with products for which there is no brand that is dominating, I would say, that industry, because otherwise people can just compare to the competitors. So typically speaking, the more familiar the user, the consumer are with the product itself, the more careful you should be at what type of strategies you want to do and how often and when do you do them.
Hey, so, okay, just jumping in here to highlight an important point. So, price skimming is the practice of starting with a price and changing it later, depending on your goals and how you're hoping to engage with consumers. So, as you're going to hear, this is where pricing strategy starts to go beyond your typical supply and demand calculations. So, okay, back to the interview. Yeah, so, okay, there's a company that jumps to mind, just thinking of Apple,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about that creating a new market. So the launch of the iPhone, for example, okay, here's a product that none of us have ever seen before. We're all very excited about it. They're going to charge a premium for it, but it's never come down. It's like they still enjoy that privileged space. I don't know, how can they get away with that, whereas others are kind of trying to compete.
Great. That's a great question, actually. That was something I was thinking about when I was preparing for this podcast about some of these strategies that what we called pricing or skimming strategies. They could be done from downward up or upward down, right? So you could actually put a product at a low price and then increase it later. First of all, to make a penetration of the market, and then as people get to use it, you can increase the price. The other way around is what Apple is doing. So Apple typically, because of their very strong brand loyalty, and that's obviously is due to their broad definition of how people perceive quality for tech products, right? So the aesthetic part that has the vision of Steve Jobs, right? That came and gave Apple its appeal to the customers still nowadays. And then with Tim Cook's experience in managing and making lean supply chains, right? So there's two great performance on the supply chain level as well on the aesthetic, on the multiple features, makes it that this brand has built and in their loyalty base, a strong loyalty, right? Strong brand dependency. So that means they could get away with having a high price at the first stage. But actually, you would be surprised, typically Apple, maybe you take it aside, but in general, you have to be careful about this strategy as well. Because if you put the price high up you're basically targeting early adopters, which if they're big enough, the market is big enough, that's great. But you'll still need to discount at some point to recoup your costs. And if you discount too late in the market, what can happen is that these users can just go to the competition at some point. So they're waiting for the Apple phone to kind of get discounted a little bit. It doesn't happen. Change to an Android, never go back, right? That's one. So the timing of also when you do this drop of the price is important. And then Apple, actually what happens at some point is that they did it too early. So 2 months, I don't remember if it's an iPhone or I think it's an iPhone, some sort of an iPhone gadget. They dropped the price 2 months after the launch. And their consumers, their early adopters complained. They said, wait a minute, we bought this 2 months ago at this price, so that's not fair. And they ended up giving a rebates back to these early adopters. Wow. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would think that they never drop their prices, but it depends, again, obviously maybe on which product they have. And in general, they still need to drop the price, even if it's for the end of life cycle, right? So typically when they prepare for the new iPhone launch, they're telling you there's an iPhone 16 coming or so on and so forth. They drop the prices for the ones that are already there, because people still buy the older versions as well.
Okay, so what have we learned so far? So basically, companies can use price skimming, so changing a product's price over time, to target different kinds of consumers. And in general, lowering your price can make your product more accessible to more people. But now, in this second part of the interview, we're going to get into the risks of lowering your price too much and too often, and why lower prices aren't exactly the cheat code to greater sales. Now remember, I started this podcast by saying prices can tell a story. So this is where we get into how. Now let's get back into it. So, okay. So, I mean, to your point, like there does come a time where you have to drop prices. How much can you drop your product's price before people start perceiving it as just of poor quality in general, or as something not worth buying, or just as something that they don't want to engage with at all?
That's a great question. So actually there's two questions here. First of all, is there an effect of dropping price, the price dropping on quality? That's the first question we should ask. And if it is, then the second question is, to which point?
Yeah.
And so we designed this experiment to answer the question whether consumers change their perception of quality from the first period to the second period. And then what happens to consumers who just come at the end and don't even observe the full price in the beginning, so that we can contrast actually the effect of the discount on previously and then after, and those who just actually come at the sale season and just buy things.
Right.
And that's what we found, is that there is a difference in how people form their perception. So it's something we call price anchoring, and that we know, but we actually could prove through this experiment exists.
All right, another quick definition for you. So a price anchor is the price against which customers compare any future price changes. So if you raise your prices after you just had a sale, they'll actually compare the higher number to the price that the product was on sale at. So the same is true the other way around. So your longtime customers might be excited about a good deal because they're anchored to your pre-sale prices. So, okay, bearing that in mind, let's get back to the interview.
So for the early adopters who come, they observe the price at full, the product at full price. They form certain quality. So we ask them to basically respond to these questions. They give us a scale of their quality. We ask them to wait. They wait, and then they come back. And then when they see the discount, they actually do not change their quality perception, meaning that they have anchored the quality on the earlier price they saw. Whereas the late consumers who come to the market and observe, they could observe the price and the discounted price, right? Typically the ticket on the product have both. But since both the prices have been observed at the same time, they just look at the price, the current price, which is the discounted one. And then that's the one that anchors their quality. So it's going to be a lower quality. Because in general, we know that lower prices give you an idea of a lower quality, higher prices. So that still is true to some extent, obviously with some scale. And here we see that actually, if you want to maybe extend this learning, is that you would not want to actually have a lot of markdowns closer to each other. You would want to leave a little bit of time for the consumer to familiarize themselves with the product, maybe at original prices, so that they can form a certain perception of the quality of the product, not based on the markdown, but based on its attributes, based on its price, obviously that can be high, based on the features, based on the aesthetic. Maybe they will not buy it because it's too pricey for them. But then later on when they come and buy it, or they want to buy it, then they don't anchor the quality on the price they see on the discount.
Interesting. Well, I mean, what does that mean for consumers who might never have engaged with your product if it wasn't for the markdown? Because now that sounds to me like then the only option is for them to perceive your product as less than, because the only time that they chose to interact with it at all was because of the markdowns.
So this is why you do not do discounting a lot.
That's fair.
Right? You should not just be dropping prices everywhere on all products in a large scale experiment. A lot of companies do that, and they think like there's gonna have bombastic type of price declines, and there's gonna be a huge increase in sales, and it doesn't happen. Or some firms will just keep using discounts and promotions in general as a way to drive traffic, but at some point users just get actually anchored to those prices, and so they expect you to always give those prices. And also they stop seeing them as good deals, and they start seeing them as maybe you're doing a bad job managing the inventory, you have a bad quality, something is not working. So you have to be careful about the timing and how often you do these price discounts or price markdowns. So I would say it's not the full answer. It's just, markdowns are the way to go here. It's a strategy that can help, but it's more importantly, you have to know how to position yourself with respect to your competitors. As you said, what is the range of prices that I give? Do I have a good product with a competitive price in general, not just with discounting? And then all the other techniques can help you leverage more of that relationship with the customer.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's really about setting expectations. Like, do you expect us to have sales all the time? And then what does that do to your impression of us? Or do you expect us to, constantly have high prices because we believe that our product is worth that? And then if you hang on to that for a few years, then you develop a reputation. And then now when a sale does come along, it's a bigger deal and it doesn't affect your reputation as much.
So that's one. But one thing you mentioned here is that, and I wanted to also explain, is that in our research, we were looking at the relationship between price and the perceived quality of the product given the price, right? In general, we do know there is a relationship between price and the decision to buy. So independently of that, we also have a relationship now established between price and quality, which inherently also influences the decision for the customer to buy. But in general, we also know that regardless of the quality, you may not have touched your quality perception. Maybe the price hasn't really affected the quality perception, but it might still affect the decision of customer buying or not. I will give you one example, which is based on what I said a little bit. When people anchor or have reference prices in their mind, maybe based on previous purchases, maybe based on knowing a competitive brand's price, and they have seen it somewhere, and then you're introducing a discount in the future, and then that means they have an expected price. They expected discount. So if your discount that you're administering is too low, they'll feel some sort of loss. And this is an irrational behavior that has been documented in literature, that consumer might not be rational. Sometimes they're like, this is not a good deal. I expected a lower discount and a higher discount than that. And that might deter them from buying. And vice versa, when they have this gain-seeking behavior, when they come and they see a great discount, more than what they expected, because they do have reference-dependent prices in their mind, then that actually increases their intention of purchase. I'm not even talking about the current price. I'm saying there is a irrational behavior that it's adding to their intention of purchase. So those things can impact as well. Pricing can have an irrational behavior, driving behavior on the customer's decision to buy, regardless whether it changes the perception of the quality or not. So it's important to know both, actually.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because, thinking about that idea of quality, I don't know, that makes it hard to figure out what's true. Like, is the product I'm buying truly something of quality? Like, if I buy this sweater, is it going to fall apart in a year? And I don't know, like because pricing can fluctuate a lot and because it can be manipulated for various purposes, like that aren't necessarily completely tied to the quality of the product um, or any other thing. I don't know. As a consumer, what can I do to make sure that if I'm buying something at a discount, that I'm buying something good, or even if I'm buying something at full price, that I'm buying something good? Is that just a risk, and then you learn by doing, or is there something I can do to preempt that a little bit and try to navigate that weird space that markdown pricing kind of causes?
So that's a great question. I would answer the question for the consumer. I would also answer it from the company. It's from perspective,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, please.
Because from the consumer's perspective, having some sort of brand knowledge or familiarity with the product can be useful, right? So, in most, I think in our lives, we deal with products that we have used at some point, right? So we know what to expect as a value or as a functionality or as, so you have to be very clear about what you want and what you expect and make sure that when you're purchasing that product, you're getting exactly those specs. And then if you don't, then hoping as much as possible looking at the competitors. It can be difficult for early products, right? So with early products, there is no market for it. That's when there is this, like, it's basically an experiment. You'll see what people are going to respond to. Maybe they'll like it, maybe they don't. And this is where I'm going to talk more about the company's perspective. So actually, companies do not want you to anchor necessarily their quality based on price, right? Given all these answers that we just gave, is that it's not a good strategy to rely only and mostly on that, because that will limit you basically on the type of strategies that you can do in pricing. And pricing can be a great lever later on to handle all the uncertainty that can happen in the market. And there is cases, for example, when we talk about high-end products, and when you establish a good, quality perception from the beginning because you actually have a good product, again, Apple or a nice bag, fashionable item, then you keep increasing the price and users get used to that and up to a certain point. So then it gives you a little bit of leeway where you can actually manipulate or leverage markups, I would say. And still, it doesn't necessarily change the perception of the quality, and vice versa, right? Also, you could start discounting a little bit the prices here and there, and that doesn't affect the price. So I would say for the quality to not be affected, you have to first establish that it's a good quality given the value of the product itself.
Right.
Have the first price to be right where it should be, and then later on, be careful about how much changes you administer.
Yeah.
So, but that's the only case really. And otherwise, you need as a company to not anchor your markdown or your quality in the price. So you want to make sure that the customer understands the value of the product you're giving by highlighting its usability, its functionality. What else do you get with this product? A great customer service, shipping for free, all of these things that actually make sure that the customer understands that even if the price is low, for example, this is a good product or good deal, right? Because I get a lot. Or even if the price is high, this is because it's sustainably and it's organic and et cetera, et cetera. So the answer is just doing a better job at communicating and convincing your customer of the value of your product so that they can dissociate the price from the quality.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier, right? Setting the right expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super fascinating.
Compared to as well to the competitors, right? Because customers are still comparing, right? And with the e-commerce and how easy it is now to just look up another competitor, and comparing specs and so on and so forth. You have to be, you have to know who are you selling to and what type of products you're making. And this is beyond my expertise because I'm not a marketing person. I'm more from a decision making. But that was one of the things I realized, that answering this from a quantitative perspective is very appealing to me. But there is a lot that can actually be done just from a marketing perspective about understanding your customers, understanding your market, and positioning yourself with the competitor. And then if that's as well done, that can dictate a good use of pricing strategies later on.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, hey, that's incredible. Professor Rim Hariss, I want to thank you for taking the time and sharing your work with us today.
Thank you so much, Eric. I had a lovely time. Thank you.
All right, so that's the show. Now, I don't know about you, but I learned a ton from this interview. I was particularly surprised by how excessive discounts can actually hurt how consumers view your product. So you should really space out your sales accordingly. Now, what did you think? Did something jump out to you as particularly surprising, or is there something that you wish you learned more about on this topic? You can let us know. Why don't you email us at delve@mcgill.ca. So a special thank you goes out to Professor Rim Hariss for joining us today, and thank you to our audience for joining us. So McGill Delve is the official thought leadership platform of the Desautels Faculty of Management at McGill University. This episode of the podcast was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Eric Dicaire. I'm also the assistant editor here at Delve, and Saku Mantere is our editor-in-chief, and he produced all the original music. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.